We're going to look at how you solve different equations with some of these families of functions from Unit 4. So we're first going to talk about inverses or opposites because we'll use those to solve. So the opposite or the inverse of adding is subtracting. The opposite of multiplication is division, and the opposite of squaring is square rooting. And again, we're going to use these operations to solve. So this is subtraction. Opposite or inverse of multiplying is dividing. And the opposite of squaring is square rooting. A good rule of thumb, if you're stuck when you are solving an equation, remember to use the opposite order of operations. Another rule is that absolute value and radicals are like parentheses, so you're going to solve those last if we're doing opposite order of operations. And then remember, whenever you solve an equation, you should always check your answer by plugging back in and making sure that both sides of the equations are equal. So again, here are the different families of functions that we've been looking at. One of them was quadratics, or when you have a squared. And again, when you're solving, if you get stuck, use opposite order of operations. So here's PEMDAS. In this problem, we have parentheses, we have exponents, we have multiplying by this -1 here, and that's it. So when we solve, we go the opposite order. We're going to get rid of the multiplying, this multiplying by -1 first by dividing by -1. So there's the first step, get rid of multiplying by dividing. We have x plus 4 squared equals 9. A negative divided by negative is a positive. Next step, get rid of the exponents, the squared, and to get rid of a square, the inverse, or the opposite, is square rooting. So we're going to square root each side. We'll have x plus 4 equals, and actually there's two answers here. The square root of 9 is 9, and we also have x plus 4 equals -9. And the reason is, when you take the, it's not 9, it's 3 and -3. And the reason is, so we have 3 and -3. 3 squared is 9, also -3 squared is 9. And then we'll subtract 4 from each side and each part of the problem. So we get two answers, x equals 3 minus 4, which is -1. And we get x equals -3. This is a -3 minus 4, which is -7. So we get two answers, and if we were to graph a parabola, here's why. At -1, there would be a root, and at -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your parabola might look something like this. So you have two solutions there. We can plug back in and check our answer. So let's try -1 first. So let's say x is -1. -1 plus 4 is 3. 3 squared is 9, and 9 times -1 is -9, so this works. Let's try this guy, -7. -7 plus 4 is -3. -3 squared is 9. 9 times -1 is -9. So both of these answers work. All right, let's clear that. Let's do the next one. So again, if you get stuck, remember PEMDAS, we're using opposite order of operations in this problem. We have addition. We have parentheses, and we have exponents. So first step, get rid of the addition first. We're going to subtract 3 from each side. We'll have x plus 1 squared equals 29 minus 3, which is 26. And then the next step is we will take square root each side. So you have x plus 1 equals, and the square root of 26 is a decimal. Calculate that. Oops. It's about 5.1. So I'm going to put about 5.1. And again, we have two answers here. X is about 5.1, x is about -5.1, because again, if we square each of those, erase that, we'll get 26. So x plus 1 is about -5.1. And last step, we will subtract 1 from each side. So x is about -4.1, and x is about -6.1. So again, two answers, and you could plug in and check. So again, the reason why we have two answers when we take the square root is because there's two numbers squared that will equal that number. So for example, 3 squared is 9 and negative 3 squared is 9. When you graph it, it crosses the x-axis twice. Okay, let's look at this guy right here. I'm going to give myself more room for C. Okay, here we are. So again, if you get stuck, use PEMDAS. In this problem, we have addition. We have multiplying by a -1 here, so multiplication, exponents in parentheses. So let's go backwards. First step, subtract 4 from each side to get rid of the addition. We have negative x minus 1 squared equals negative 57. Divide each side by -1. We have x minus 1 squared equals 57. So that got rid of the multiplying. Let's take the square root to get rid of the exponents. So you have x minus 1, you get 2 answers. And again, the square root of 57 is a decimal, so a round. It's about 7.55 and negative 7.55. Last step, add 1 to each side. And we get x is about, and I should use the wavy lines here, 8.55. And x is about negative 6.55. And you could plug in your answer to check. Okay, we'll look at the last one here. And I'll give myself more room. We'll write opposite order of operations. We'll write PEMDAS. Alright, so in this problem we have parentheses, exponents, subtraction. So we're going to solve this way. Get rid of the subtraction first by adding 5 to each side. 2x minus 3 squared equals 16. Next step, get rid of the exponents by taking the square root. 2x minus 3 equals 4, but also 2x minus 3 equals -4, because -4 squared is 16 and 4 squared is 16. Next, we'll add 3 to each side. 2x equals 7, and 2x equals -1. Divide by 2. So x equals 3.5, and x equals -1/2, or -0.5. And you could plug in your answer to check, and for each of these we should be able to get 11 by plugging in to solve. Alright, so now let's move on to, why will you sometimes have two answers? Think about this graphically. Solve for x squared equals 4. So we can graph this. I don't have my graphing calculator up, so I'm just going to make a table. Let's say x is -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Alright, so I'm just going to make a graph by plugging in. -2 squared, so I'm just plugging into this graph. -2 squared is 4, -1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So if I were to graph these points, -2, 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, you can see right here, this has one answer, but if I were to shift the graph, so let's say we did let's just say I did x squared minus 1, and let me pull this up here. Or actually, no, what if I just said, all right, let's use this. Where does x squared equal 4? And that's the y value 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's that line right here. This is y equals 4. And you can see that there's two answers. And there's two answers for when y equals 3. There's two answers for when y equals 2. There's only one answer for y equals 0. And then below that there's no answer. So you can see that with a parabola there's two answers for some values of y. And same with square roots. remember, well, actually not the same for square. Same with absolute value. So absolute value is V-shaped. And that will also have two answers sometimes. Okay, two more types of problems. We're going to look at solving with square roots and then also solving with absolute values. So again, the first guy here, again, maybe I should take a screenshot, so let's do that. Okay, so again, we have our PEMDAS. So with this, we have multiplication. Remember, square roots are like parentheses. So here's how we're going to solve. Get rid of the multiplying first by dividing by 2. We have the square root of x plus 4 equals 5. How do we get rid of a square root? We square it. So we'll square this guy too. And we'll have x plus 4 equals 25. Subtract 4 from each side. And x equals 21. This one we have one answer. We can check our answer by plugging in. 21 plus 4 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. So that works. Oops. Just get rid of this right now. Okay, let's try the next one. In this problem we have adding. So let's write our PEMDAS here. We have addition. We have multiplying by a -1, and we have square root, which is like parentheses. All right, so solve. First, get rid of the addition by subtracting. So we have negative square root of x minus 1 equals 4. Get rid of this negative by dividing by a -1. So we have the square root of x minus 1 equals -4. Get rid of the square root by squaring. You have x minus 1 equals 16. And get rid of the adding or subtracting by adding, x equals 17. And again, you could plug in and check your answer. 17 minus 1 is 16. The square root of 16 is 4, or -4. And 3 minus a -4 will give us 7. So that does work. Okay, let's try two more square roots. And then we'll take a look at absolute value. Okay, so this guy right here, again, we have our PEMDAS. First step is get rid of the negative, we have multiplying, and we have addition, this plus 7, and we have the parentheses, which is like the square root. Okay, so first step, get rid of the addition by subtracting. -2 square root of x equals 13 minus 7 is 6, so we got rid of the addition. Now get rid of the multiplying by dividing. So we have the square root of x equals 6 divided by -2 is -3. And then we get rid of the parentheses by squaring. And by parentheses, I mean square root. So we'll square each side. So x equals 9. Plug in and check our answer. The square root of 9 is 3, or -3. And -3 times -2 is 6. 6 plus 7 is 13. So that does work. Okay. And last one, and then we'll take a look at absolute value. Okay, so this guy right here, we have PEMDAS. All right, we have this division here. We also have the square root, which is like parentheses. So first step, get rid of the division by multiplying. We're going to multiply each side by 3. Square root of x minus 1 equals -3. We'll square each side. X minus 1 equals 9. Add 1 to each side. So x equals 10. And again, you could check your answer by plugging in. Okay, solving with absolute value. Last thing. Okay, so solving with absolute value, again, there can be two different answers, and here's the reason why. The absolute value of some number, so think of this as some number equals 8. In other words, what two numbers are 8 away from 0? Well, 8 and -8. So we can split this up. The inside of this can be 8, and the inside of this can also be -8 because the absolute value of -8 is 8. So we do have to split it up. We'll subtract 2 from each side. And there's two answers, x equals 6 and x equals -10. And the reason, again, why there's two answers is because -10 plus 2 is -8, and the absolute value of -8 is 8, it's distance from 0, and then 6 plus 2 is also 8. So when you're solving an absolute value, do split it up, but only when you get the absolute value by itself. So let's take a look at B right here. Before you can split it up, get rid of anything on the outside. So we have negative x plus 2 equals negative 5. Divide each side by negative 1. Now we can split it up. So we have x plus 2, the absolute value of that equals 5. So in here, this number inside can be 5 or negative 5. So we're going to split that up. X plus 2 equals 5, and x plus 2 can be negative 5. And then we'll solve. Two answers, x can be 3, and x can be negative 7. And then when you plug in, you should get negative 1 for each answer. Okay, let's try a few more. And before we do that, let's go here. Why will you sometimes have two answers? Think about it graphically. What two numbers are 3 away from 0 if you have the absolute value of x equals 3? And it's negative 3 and 3, so there can be two answers. All right, let's look at this last two. So again, when you're solving absolute value, get that by itself first before you split it up. So here, get rid of the negative 6 first. 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3 equals negative 18. Divide each side by 2. X minus 3 can be negative 9. And we're going to split that up. And we have, let's see if this one works. X minus 3 can be negative 9, and x minus 3 can be 9. Add 3 to each side. Let's see if this works here. So x can be negative 6 and x can be 12. All right, let's try negative 6 in here first. Negative 6. All right, so we have 2 times negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9, and that turns into a positive 9. Plus 6. Okay, so this one is 18 plus 6. All right, so this one doesn't work. Let's try this one right here. 12 minus 3 is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. Okay, so actually here none of these work right here because, and this is why, it's because it's a negative right here, and we can't have an absolute value be a negative number. So this one, there's neither of these is a solution, and we could graph and see what that looked like. All right, let's try this one. So first step, divide by negative 4. This one should work. 2x plus 1 equals, the absolute value of 2x plus 1 equals 6. Split it up, 2x plus 1 equals 6. 2x plus 1 should be negative 6. Divide each side, subtract 1 from each side first. 2x equals 5. 2x equals negative 7. Divide each side by 2. Two answers, x equals 2.5 and x equals negative 3.5. And this one should work, so let's try 2.5. 2.5 times 2 is 5. 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 times, yep, that one works, and this one should work as well. Let's go back to this guy right here, this negative. The reason why that can't work is if you think about this graph, okay, so now this is pulled up. When we graph it, it might look something like this, and there's nothing negative, and that's why there's no solution. So let's try graphing this one to look at the solution. All right, so to graph, new document, add a graph page, and it was this, 2, and then its absolute value of x minus 3, and then you have plus 6. Let's just graph that. And you can see it's way up here, so there's no solution for negative 12. It just doesn't work. All right, so we're going to spend 2 days on this. But remember, use opposite order of operations, and when you take the square root, you might have 2 answers, and we have an absolute value, you might have 2 answers as well.